So this is me. I do that. I'm currently at the place called Bradley Hospital, which is a teaching hospital for Warren Alpert School of Medicine at Brown University. I That is the Oracle. That's right, Teresa. Yeah, and so it's a teaching hospital for Brown. I am Brown and at a university, but it's the actual school in Rhode Island. Okay, so we're going to be talking. I use this phrase "invisible individuals," and we're going to talk about systemic racism, anti-racism, and a lot of these other concepts. Okay, and this is kind of our objectives. Also, I'm a dog person. You know, it's like I'm allergic to cats, so I'm not necessarily anti-cat. There's some cat history there, and I just like it. That's a whole other talk. Okay, but this is my little dog. See, he gets so nervous, and everybody's usually nervous. Yeah, and is anyone else getting an echo, or is it might be feedback? Sometimes if you're near the speaker, it's feedback. If you're getting an echo, just let us know. So we're gonna. I usually like to talk about the terms first because the terms are changing a little bit over time, and I think they are important to have that terminology. I'm going to spend a lot of time on the micro level, but also the community level. Okay, because I think that's important for but some of you, the face-to-face interaction is kind of where I spend most of my day, and that's why we're going to focus a lot on that. But a lot of us are here to do work in communities and do work at a higher level than just like the person sitting across from your desk. And so I think that that's important too. So um, this is a quote. I don't know if anyone has anyone read Ralph Ellison's Invisible Man, or anyone not have a girlfriend, no social life, just me. Great, wonderful. Thanks, I appreciate that, everyone. And so this is a quote by Ralph Ellison, one of my favorite writers. And it's, "I am an invisible man. I am a man of substance, of flesh and bone, fiber and liquids, and I might even be said to possess a mind. I am invisible. Understand, simply because people refuse to see me." And so that's essentially what one of our concerns is, and that we hear that a lot throughout different aspects of this conversation, not just in the literature, but also in the um, but also like in our day-to-day kind of clinicians, teachers, educators interacting with people, saying like, you know, a lot of times we see that there's an invisibility to our families, and sometimes in a very literal way, like, you know, like I work a lot with Native American tribes when I spent time in Oklahoma, and that was a huge aspect of it, is the invisibility of the tribal nations, the populations, the experience there. And so that's an important thing. So I'm going to go off screen for a second for the slides, so I can see me. One of the reasons I do work in culture is because I also do work in trauma. And I think if you're doing work in culture, you're doing work in trauma, and vice versa. Because they're, you know, the history of systemic racism, you know, even individual oppression, it just, they go hand in hand. That's just how the history works. That's not me saying that. It's a lot of people way smarter than me. And so a role in the trauma world is, that I think is applicable in the world when we talk about culture, diversity, equity, is being heard, being recognized is the opposite of being traumatized. And I'll say that again: being heard, being recognized is the opposite of being traumatized. So the first thing, especially with students, like especially like medical students, when I work with them, that they say they want the, but I call it, they want the card. All right. So Joseph, give me the card. That when I work with, you know, Mexican Americans, I say this to them. And first, that's really racist. Second, that's not how this stuff works. Okay. But they want the card because they get that for, you know, respiratory infections. They get that for RSV. They get that for everything they do in medicine, and they want the card. And it's like, no, this is a process of hearing people, of recognizing them, which also means you got to step out of your role as an expert. And I don't have, I think, a lot of virtues, but I know how stupid I am. And so it's really easy for me not to be an expert. It's like, man, I am an idiot. Yeah, I lost my keys and they were in my hand. Okay, that happened yesterday. That's what happened to me. I lost my keys, they were in my hand. Like, where are my freaking keys at? Like, my neighbor's like, dude, you're holding it. Like, yeah, I know. It's like, I'm an idiot. And so it's really easy for me to step off that pedestal and say, like, yeah, I have no idea what it's like. I just really don't. And sometimes people feel like that shows that they aren't an expert. And kind of, I think that's who they need. They need a human there, just like Dana said. And so that acknowledgement of invisibility, I see, that's why I start these talks with that slide, is because that's the hardest thing for a lot of people to do, is say, yeah, you are invisible. Maybe because they feel like they're culpable in the visibility, that their culture that they represent is culpable, and maybe they are. But a lot of times when I do that in the face-to-face interactions, the thank you, Amanda, for validating me. A lot of times when I see that in face-to-face interactions, it'll be like, you know what, Amanda, you're the first person to ever say that, to acknowledge that. That's what I get. And it's like, yeah, like this is not like, necessarily a culture thing. Have you ever felt like known something to your bones? Like, let's say like your boss was evil or something, or like, this person was a crazy person, right? We're talking about interpersonal stuff and no one validated it. And then finally someone said, look, Olga, you're right. And you felt like the world, like, oh my God, I like you felt this pressure go off of you, right? This is what we're talking about with the invisibility, but on a very bigger scale in a much, much more higher stakes. Yeah. But it's really essentially that move. It's like, no, you're not crazy. The world is. That's you're not wrong. There's things wrong in the world. And obviously that's a harder conversation. So that's where we're going to spend the next couple of minutes talking about that. So, okay, terminology. Okay, so we're about to talk about racism and culture. Okay, just in the chat box, what's the worst that could happen, right? Come on, we're about to talk about, come on, just type it in. What's the worst that could happen today? Okay, come on, we talk about culture, racism, systemic trauma, historical trauma. Worst is going to happen tonight. Type it in. What do you got? Validated harm, someone will get upset, triggering. Thank you for saying that, Bridget. You offend, thank you, Melissa. I offend someone. Yeah. So here's the worst that could happen, right? This is what it will look like, right? This is our worst case scenario, right? Like we just blow everything up. This is it's everything goes off. Like you set someone off. Yeah, you're right. And we're again not saying that this, that like, everything's going to be rosy. We're talking about difficult subjects. One thing, so I do work with a model of therapy called trauma focused CBT. So it's a model for kids 3 to 18, and I'm a trainer in that. And in our trainers meeting, me and two of the other BIPOC trainers did a talk on culture as part of our trainers meeting. And one of the things I told them regarding this, like this particular slide, is okay, so I'm going to speak for myself and my colleague. We're trauma therapists. We talk about sex and death all the time. A family comes in and says, hey, Miss Gastaneda, I can't talk about sex. Is what if they're going to do it? What if they do sex? What? And Sandra's like, they know. Sandra's point is they're already having the conversation about sex. You're just not involved with it. Or they're already having a conversation about death and dying. You're just not talking with the mom. And it's not that Sandra's being mean to that parent. Is saying like Sandra's trying to normalize it to like give some education, saying, who better to talk with your daughter, mom, than you about this? Who else, right? And so that's kind of our point with this slide is that yeah, so, yeah, we could offend, people get upset, people get triggered. We really do try to maintain that. By the way, if that does happen to you, please step off or turn your camera off. We don't, you're not gonna like no one's gonna come and yell at you, okay, in your room. And so unless they have like the power of Terry and can actually infiltrate your Zoom camera, which is I will figure that out. That is a superpower I need one day. I'll figure that out for my students. But no one will do that. So we want you to have the conversation at the level that you feel comfortable doing it tonight. Okay. So if you're going to sit back, I'm just going to kind of take in and hear what people say and look at the chat and I'm good to go. Great. If you're like, hey, I have some comments, I have questions, and that's your comfort level, that's wonderful. Okay. I also have my email on this. So if you're in, Caltrain can get a hold of me. So you're like after this, like, hey, I had a question I didn't want to ask on the talk, but I kind of would like to run it by Dr. G. That's fine. Okay. I will make myself available to anyone on this call from now until I die of a stress-related stroke at the computer I sit at. And any time in between. Okay. So please feel free to contact. Hopefully not the stroke thing happens. Okay. So pop quiz, folks. Chat, or you can go off mic. Take any of these terms. Like if you were to explain them to someone, and we're not talking about like a doctor, we're talking about like a parent or like a teenager or like a teacher, and they're like, hey Joy, what I hear this like CRT stuff. What even is CRT? Right? And Joy wanted to take a shot, or like, hey, Emily, what is anti-racism? What's that stuff? Like, what's that term mean? How would you explain it? I would say the volunteer gets a prize and, make Dana and Haley give you something, but I cannot guarantee that. Okay, you get the prize of pride. Okay. Take a shot at any one of these folks. We'll see. We have our brave participants on tonight. I know one person.
I think, oh.
Okay.
Laura, you can go after if you want to.
Y'all go right in.
I think for critical race theory, it generally applies to like ways of looking at systems and how they have historically been oppressive to folks based on race to different. So you're looking at data, you're looking at how policies have affected races differently. It is generally used or has like started in legal professions.
Beautiful. All right, you're gonna take over this talk from me, Mariah. Okay, you're done. Well, I'm done. I'm gonna step out. I'm gonna have a sandwich. Okay, that was beautifully done. Thank you, Mariah. So, Laura, did you want to take it? You can do the same one or a different one. You know, no one. You don't have to pick a new one.
I was going to talk about microaggression more in the sense that, you know, you stereotype Hispanic people, maybe not necessarily being born here just because we look, you know, Hispanic. They might assume that they were born in Mexico. So that's kind of one example that I could think of.
Great example. Yeah, no, it's a perfect example. Is like, I get this question like, hey, where are you from? I'm from Texas. No, where are you from? Auburn Street. Well, like, what are you looking for, man? Lubbock Heights? Like, what do you mean? Where am I from? Like, yeah, where are you from there? Tony, what about you?
I'll go with historical trauma.
Perfect.
Like how Native Americans don't trust the government.
Yeah.
You know, historically, they've done them wrong several times. Yeah. There's also like, I was learning one about how food was one of them. Like a lady was telling me like she was raised not to have that much food in her home. And yeah, she kind of raised her kids the same way. So it was also like historical trauma.
Thank you, Tony, because actually historical trauma actually gets used in a couple of different ways. And you hit both of the big ones. One is like Native American experience of, you know, genocide in North America, following them to now in the 21st century. Another one is, hey, my family has trauma going back to like the 19th century. And so this is why we have some of these particular behaviors that we do now as a family. So Dana B, because we have a couple of Danas. And yeah, good example of microaggression, Joseph.
Thank you so much. Great to be here with everyone. I wanted to talk about systemic racism. It's by design for against all nationalities, unless you have unearned privilege as a white individual. Myself being a fifth generation immigrant born with unearned privilege on the land of Sauk and Meskwaki. And so learning about all cultures, the Chinese prison camps, the genocide of Native Americans, the enslavement of African Americans, recruiting Chinese to come and do the Transcontinental Railroad. And then when it's completed, having the first public immigration law, the Chinese Exclusion Act of 1882, kicking them out of the country, what's happening at the border. It's, and our tax dollars perpetuate it every day, all day long.
Outstanding example and good, very specific examples. You very much know your history. Yeah, this is especially with, I'm going to go off slide for a second. With systemic racism, it's not a one or two person, it's a system across kind of what Tony was getting at, a system connected usually in history, almost always in history. The chat, and those in the chat box that, you know, you have, those are on point. So thank you, Sarah. Thank you, Shanette, Gibson, everybody. And thank you, Gibson. We're actually going to get to that too, about how this is not just like an emotional effect, a behavioral effect. Tony gave a good example like of like behavioral family patterns. And those are the easiest to see in the research, but there's also genetic effects of this, which we're going to get to in a second. Like if anyone knows epigenetics, things like that, or John Henryism, and we'll talk about that in this talk. Okay? I really wanted to do just like, we could just do this all night, but I'm going to just to actually give you what I promised I'd give you. We're going to kind of talk about the high points of these terms, and y'all hit pretty much all of them. Okay, so I'm just going to window dress what everybody said. Okay? Oh, sorry, I think I interrupted somebody. Lena? No? Okay. If I did, just please interrupt me, because obviously I talk too much. Kind of what Dana was getting at, Dana B a second ago, is this quote by James Baldwin. Another one of my favorite writers is, white people are trapped in a history they don't understand. Like that's a big aspect of systemic racism. And that's probably the best one sentence description I've ever heard of systemic racism is James Baldwin's, that one is saying like, no, it's not just like if you're Mexican or Black or Jewish or like everybody is affected. And Dana's point got to that is like everybody is impacted by this. We are all lesser for this phenomenon. And so I'm a big fan of videos because you shouldn't have to hear me talk all the time, okay? And so one of the videos I want to show you is, sorry, let me go grab it real quick. It's a kind of a cartoony one, I apologize, but it's one I have shown this to like MDs and they were blown away. I think it's pretty basic and some of y'all have probably seen this video already, so I will just show it relatively quickly. So this is one that I use a lot, and I'm going to put this, if you would like to follow along, every link I have, I'm going to put it in the chat box. If you would like to put it up on your screen and bookmark it, but you do not have to. That's not a requirement. But so these will be in the chat box once we do the link. So
this is Jamal. Jamal is a boy who lives in a poor neighborhood. He has a friend named Kevin who lives in a wealthy neighborhood. All of Jamal's neighbors are African American, and all of Kevin's neighbors are white. Because Jamal's school district is mostly funded by property taxes, his school is not very well funded. His classrooms are overcrowded, his teachers are underpaid, and he doesn't have access to high-quality tutors or extracurricular activities. Kevin's school district is also funded by property taxes, so his school is very well funded. His classrooms are never crowded, his teachers are very well paid, and he has access to high-quality tutors and lots of extracurricular activities. Kevin and Jamal live only a few streets away from each other. So how come they're growing up in such different worlds with such different opportunities for success? The answer has to do with America's history of systemic racism. To understand it better, let's look at what life was like for Kevin and Jamal's grandparents. Decades after the Civil War, many government agencies started to draw maps dividing cities into sections that were either desirable or undesirable for investment. This practice was called redlining, and it usually blocked off entire Black neighborhoods from access to private and public investment. Banks and insurance companies used these maps for decades to deny Black people loans and other services based purely on race. Historically speaking, owning a home and getting a college education is the easiest way for an American family to build wealth. But when Jamal's grandparents wanted to buy a house, the banks refused because they lived in a neighborhood that was redlined. So Jamal's grandparents were not able to buy a home, and because colleges could prevent them from attending through legal segregation, their options for higher education were really scarce. Kevin's grandparents, on the other hand, got a low-interest loan to buy their first house and got accepted into a handful of top universities, which traditionally only accepted white students. This opened up a wealth of opportunities that they were able to pass on to their kids and grandkids. Even as late as the 1980s, an investigation into the Atlanta real estate market showed that banks were more willing to lend to low-income white families than to middle or upper-income African-American families. As a result, today, for every $100 of wealth held by a white family, Black families have $5.04. A 2017 study confirms that redlining is still affecting home values in major cities like Chicago today. This explains how Kevin and Jamal inherited vastly different circumstances. Unfortunately, the story doesn't end there. A big part of systemic racism is implicit bias. These are prejudices in society that people are not aware that they have. Let's go back to Kevin and Jamal. Against all odds, Jamal manages to be the only student from his high school to get accepted into a great university, the same one that Kevin and his high school friends are attending. But after Kevin and Jamal both graduate, Jamal notices that his resume isn't drawing as much interest as Kevin's, even though they graduated from the same program with the exact same GPA. Unfortunately for Jamal, studies show that resumes with white-sounding names get twice as many callbacks as identical resumes with Black-sounding names. Implicit bias is one of the reasons why the Black unemployment rate is twice the rate of white unemployment, even among college graduates today. You can see evidence of systemic racism in every area of life. The disparities in family wealth, incarceration rates, political representation, and education are all examples of systemic racism. Unfortunately, the biggest challenge with systemic racism is that there's no single person or entity responsible for it, which makes it very hard to solve. So what can you do? The first thing you can do is work towards becoming more aware of your own implicit biases. What are some prejudices that you might hold that you're not aware of? Second, let's acknowledge that the consequences of slavery and Jim Crow laws are still affecting access to opportunity today. As a result, we should support systemic changes that create more equal opportunities for everyone. Increasing public school funding and making it independent from property taxes would be a great start, so that poor and wealthy districts can receive equal access to resources. Systemic problems require systemic solutions. Luckily, we're all part of the system, which means that we all have a role to play in making it better. Peace.
All right. Okay. And I will put that link. I know some of you put in the chat that you use that for some of your trainings. I found that it's a very, very quick, also very, just very illustrative example. Also throughout this talk, I will kind of, as Dana alluded to, I will have kind of keep it real moments. Okay. So here's the first one. So I'm a first generation graduate, means I'm the first in my family to go to college. So me and my brother, the first to ever go to college in our entire family, because in my family, if you do not go to prison, you hit the mountaintop. So I overshot a tiny bit. Okay. And so, but and also now I'm faculty at, technically faculty at like Brown's Medical School. One of my friends, when I moved here, his name's Kenny, he's African-American. And I've known him for years. He calls me, he's like, hey man, how's Rhode Island, man? How's Brown? I was like, brother, man, it's a little bright here. Yeah, it's a little bright, man. He's like, what do you mean? I was like, you get what I'm saying, right? And I was like, he's like, they're mean. Like, no, they're all very nice to me, but I'm very well aware that I'm the Mexican in the room. And it's like, and it's not, it's just this, that one of the things that when we talk about systemic racism, it's like just this, we'll get the medical and biological impact of that when we talk about John Henryism in about, 15, 20 minutes. But essentially that, yeah, you feel this pressure, right? And you see that a lot in certain, like in the literature, like scientific literature, and also some of the more like first-person testimonials. Anyone ever read like Maya Angelou, Ibram Kendi, they'll talk about that experience, and that's a very real experience that we want to acknowledge, but it's coming from the system. If I could force my trainees to, and I do force my personal trainees to do this, this phrase at the end of that video, systemic, problems require systemic solutions, right? Which means we're all part of the system, therefore we can make some kind of impact. Rosalia.
Yeah, I think this might be a silly question, but since this is my first time watching that video, when it showed the property taxes, I think it was connected to the schools. Can you elaborate a little bit about that?
Absolutely. Yeah. So I can, I'll give you an example from my personal experience. So I originally grew up in West Texas, because I committed a sin in a past life. I don't know what it was, but it must have been horrible. And I literally lived on the wrong side of the tracks. The railroad tracks cut the town in half. On the east side, on like East Lubbock, very poor. It's where all the Mexican and Black kids live. And so on the other side, the west side, is where all the Caucasian kids live. And so they pay more taxes because it's just a wealthier, their parents have, better jobs. So the schools get the money from the taxes. That's why you see such, like some of you who work in the schools, you go to this school, literally 2 blocks over is a totally different school, right? That's why, because the taxes are getting taken out. And that's decided by the local legislature, which is why I usually encourage people to get involved in their local legislature, because things like this is where you can actually make a really huge impact very quickly. So my mom worked 3 jobs at all times and could barely make ends meet. We always had a utility off at any point in time. Like we kind of rolled the dice, like, man, we got 6s, man. We got to get, lights off this week. And then now with charter schools, that's a different thing, because theoretically it's kind of immune to that. But when you see it like Texas is a good example where I'm from, it kind of goes the same direction that way. So they kind of take the money from there. So like the district, like whatever your district is in, the taxes, the wealthier the people, the more tax money you get, but therefore the more money the school gets. And that's a very short, oversimplified version, because I know there's also some other things that go with that. But just to address your question, Ruby. Ruby.
I just wanted to comment when I saw the video. It just reminded me of how I grew up, because I grew up in Santa Barbara. And so I know a lot of people know Santa Barbara, Harry and Meghan Markle, Oprah Winfrey, which it's really Montecito. It's not even Santa Barbara. So we always laugh because you can get off on the freeway, and if you turn right, you go to Montecito, where it's super wealthy and it's old money. And if you turn left, you're in the east side of Santa Barbara, where it's Black and Mexicans. And you see that in the school because the school system is so different just by turning right or left. And then if you go up on the Mesa, which is where I live, then the socioeconomic goes up because you're at the beach. And my kids had such a different education experience because there was so much wealth on the Mesa. And I remember working the child welfare hotline, and iPads were a new thing. And a teacher from my kid's school called and said, I want to report neglect because the mom can't afford an iPad. And this is an iPad school. And I said, that is not neglect. Like, she can't afford it. And so that just reminded me of that and the difference.
Yeah, thank you for the comment, Ruby. And I will come on Selena's one, and then I promise I will stop tangenting. But I appreciate the interaction because like sometimes people don't, and it makes for a very difficult talk. Like if y'all are mad at me, I'm cool with that. But if you're like silent, that's a little harder. And so I actually have a kind of a unique perspective on the reparations because I do a lot of work with offenders, like kids and teens who sexually offend. So we have a formal reparation part for their offense. We tend to have this policy that to repair is two parts. One is to legitimately, genuinely say through not just words, but action that I am sorry. Like, how am I going to repair this to the thing I can control? But the other person has to say, I forgive you. They also reserve the right to say, no, I don't want it. And so I think that I know the first part when at least my understanding of a lot of the conversation around reparations talks about that first one, but I tend to hear not a lot on that second one of like, hey, well, do you want it? Like, is it like, because some of my colleagues who do a lot more work in that area and have a lot more conversations there are saying, hey, I don't like, one of my colleagues, she's an African-American professor, and she's like, I don't even want it. Like, you can't give me anything, you can't make it better. And I'm like, it's a fair argument. If we had one of our kids that, say that to like their perpetrator, we'd like, yeah, that's a fair argument. So I'll actually give you a resource, Tony. If you type in Project Making Medicine, which is at the University of Oklahoma, which works a lot with the tribal populations in North America, Dr. Dolores D. Bigfoot, a Caddo Nation elder, is one of the co-creators and co-founders of that. And actually, they have some very specific conversations about the honoring of treaties, the reparations for the Native American populations. I think it's a really interesting conversation. So if you're interested in that and you can't find that resource, let me know. But it's I was at Oklahoma for a while, and they do specific work, not just at the individual therapy level, but at the policy level in North America, which I think is important. Thank y'all so much for your comments. This is great. I appreciate that. I think I missed it was Project Making Medicine, Mercedes. That's what it was. Now, y'all did a great job with anti-racism. Y'all nailed the part. It's like, I'm not racist is not the point. And that silence and inaction is literally lethal. If anyone knows the Kitty Genovese story, that's a little dated, or the more technical term is bystander effect. We need to be active participants, not just bystanders. And this is why I'm a big James Baldwin fan, is because anti-racism can be seen as a call to understand what Baldwin's referencing. It's like, all of us are trapped. We can't, if you're in a trap, you can't just like, well, guess we're trapped, Taylor. That's not how it works. Like, okay, we got to have a plan. It has to be strategic. We can't just let it get better over time. And I think, and again, some resources I'll give you in a second, but of course, a lot of people know Ibram Kendi. I usually talk about critical race theory just because it's come up a lot in the recent past. Now, here's why this is interesting to me, because I did an undergrad double major in psychology and philosophy. So if the whole doctor thing didn't work out, I could think deep thoughts about being unemployed. And so but I learned about critical race theory in a senior level philosophy class on social and human sciences. And it was talked about, I think, forgot who said earlier, but whoever said earlier nailed it. It was originally like Derek Bell and people like that. It was a legal theory, a hyper-specific legal theory on housing. And here's what they were looking at was they were looking at intersectionality. They were also looking at the internalization. This is also where I come in the conversation because I do a lot of trauma work. And a big part of it, this is like you internalize racism. Ibram Kendi also speaks a lot about this. But what I mean by a hyper-specific legal theory is that it was saying that here's the original argument, is my understanding. Okay, this is like in the 70s, early 80s. We've had Civil Rights Act, the Voting Rights Act, we've had Martin, we've had Malcolm, we've had Stokes. So why isn't everything better by 85? Like we had all this why isn't everything great? It's a good question. They're like, so why do we, and the redlining is a good example. It was kind of their like kind of primary example, but they were using that to say like, oh, because we have systemic racism is the short answer. So there's a systemic problem, not just like individual legislatures or just individual people or individual sheriffs. It's a whole system. And so we need a systemic solution. And that was really it. I also talk about critical race theory because I interact a lot with law enforcement out here, that, one bad apple, Sandra doesn't make the barrel bad, right? I hear that a lot. And I rebuttal it with what I call the chicken McNugget rebuttal. So like if you went to McDonald's, you got a 20-piece nugget and there was a Band-Aid on one of your nuggets, you would ask some questions, right? It's like, I want to see Ronald. I want to see like where this, and they say, look, Lori, one bad nugget doesn't make the whole trip. Like, I don't care about the other 19. There's a Band-Aid on this nugget. What is going on here? Which is why critical race theory is usually said, critical race theory is an investigation. It's a question. Like, this is weird that we can't have that we have all this progress in like the 60s, especially, and then nothing. And so things like that. And so it's a good question. But essentially, it's a very kind of abstruse legal theory. And so essentially so when I heard this coming up in debates, because I, was in Texas at the time, like it was people are getting in fights on legislature floors. I'm like, the equivalent to me would be if people in the House of Representatives started yelling and cussing at each other over string theory and physics like that. Wouldn't necessarily surprise me, but it'd be really bizarre. Because it's such a specific theory, but it's a good one, and it's really originates from housing and legal arguments in housing in the 80s, but it's really an investigation. So what are all these blocks? And it really is highlighting the systemic racism mechanics is what it does a really good job of. And also the internalization. Now, again, this is just for your information. I've already referenced Ibram Kendi. By the way, my nephew just graduated from Boston University. Ibram Kendi has a professorship there, and he has he teaches a course there. My nephew took the course. The first semester was offered, and I actually wanted to convince my nephew to do a 21 Jump Street so I could pretend I was an undergrad at BU just so I could see Professor Kendi. But they wouldn't let me do that. Okay, that's some legal problems with that. Again, these are not like all fees all inclusive, but just some good examples of it. So like James Wilson talks a lot about Native American, Rodolfo Acuna about the Mexican, the Chicano experience especially. And if anyone's familiar with the 1619 project, it's brilliant. Yeah. So we clarified terms, so now we're gonna spend the time, what do I freaking do? Okay. So let's start with the person across the room from you, okay? So here's my question to y'all. Okay, mic's off, chat. What was your culture training like? We all have it, right? We all had the mandatory culture training what was yours like? Mine kind of sucked, I'll be honest. I'll tell you in a second why it sucked, but what was yours like? Mine was horrible, honestly. And I've had multiple of them, and I was left feeling pretty dissatisfied. What about y'all? That's a iceberg. Okay, what else? I'm like, yeah, it's just a little bit of the iceberg, just hitting the tip. And it's like, okay, may not be, okay, great, cool. Any other experiences people have for when they got like their, culture training grads, or like they had their, agency training or anything?
I disagreed. I had some disagreements with it.
Okay.
I didn't want to argue, because I was being trained. So that was
Thank you. So, yeah, you had you're like, I don't know if that sounds right. But you're like, hey man, I want to go to lunch. So right, and so Malia, I'm glad you had one that was really focused on like your culture, but it seems like it focused on one culture, right? And then I think someone had their hand raised, but I did not see them.
Anna. Ours was pretty good. We actually had that video in our training.
That's awesome.
And I'd say for the most part it was good. I thought that video was extremely informative and very true. And I grew up in, well, it doesn't matter. I grew up in a rural area, but it was near South Sacramento, which was a very poverty-stricken area. And so I have, so I've seen some of that.
Yeah, and I actually have seen more recent, like especially if you had your training more recently, I see it got better. And I don't know if this is true or not, but it's just what I've seen. Anything social work, you're in the social work area, social workers tend to be going in a really good direction. Not every program, but a lot of them are going in a really good direction because I tend to work with them a lot. I tend to also, thank you, Dana, seeing more time spent on this rather than just you get one lecture on it. And so like, great, but they're also saying like, hey, this is still not enough time. Like this is a whole expertise. Any other comments? Oh, thank you, Zoe. Yeah, different language with word choice in it. Thanks, yeah, I work a lot with attorneys. Like, yeah, we get nothing. You're like, yeah, the culture is not the law. And so, and thank you, Gibson, for saying that too, because when I ask this question, I hope that usually one person will say, hey, I just grew up in a very diverse area. Like, I grew up in Frisco, I grew up in like NYC or something like that, or Miami, like some place that like it's really kind of known for a lot of diversity, and that's just kind of part of how that place runs. And so, but I also have had Lori's experience where it's like, just a lot of people who are, because again, I'm in Texas, and it's just like a lot of, very old Caucasian men teaching you about culture, which is like very hilarious to me. And so it's like, yeah, it's like me talking to you about jet engines, right? And so it's like, may not be very important. And I actually have gotten Andreas, which is like, there's not a problem. Okay. This isn't a problem. We fixed the problem, right? And so, Jeanette, that like the community, if you're in a community-based program too, I think that has a very hard community focus. I think they tend to be a little more methodical about it too. Which is, I really, we're going to see a resource from a community psychology program at the University of Kansas that I think is very helpful. So here's mine, ready? It was awful. My actual thesis and dissertation, my master's and PhD, they were in culture, and the textbook I had said there's only 4 cultures. I don't know if y'all knew that there are only 4 cultures, but that's what the textbook said. This was not like 1960. This is 2009. Okay, and so I had to unlearn a lot of stuff. And so, so not only did I feel like I didn't have great training, I had like, it felt like it made me more racist in a way. I'm like, I think I'm learning some racism. I'm not learning culture. Like it's also my culture training is also why I don't eat tacos in public. Because I feel like they're looking me up on Wikipedia, like, look at Michael, he loves it, just like it says on the little entry. Because I thought I liked tacos because they were delicious, but apparently I'm genetically engineered to like tacos according to the textbook I had in grad school. Because Mexicans like tacos is what that actually was in the book. And so, yeah, Farron, thank you, Farron, because that was kind of the thing is like, this is how you talk to someone who's African American. Like, man, I want to get punched, man. Like that's gonna happen. I talked to my friend Kitty, he's gonna punch me or like say, why are you being weird today? Yeah, it just made me more racist. So I had to unlearn a lot of stuff. Okay. And so so if you had my experience, you'll be okay. If you had a better one, you'll be okay too. Okay. But if you did have my experience, you realize you really have to unlearn a lot of stuff too. And so that's actually to Gibson's kind of comment. I did my dissertation. If anybody, here's my keep it real moment. Everybody ready for this section? My dissertation showed that the psychology culturation measures are crap. That's really what they are. They're crap. So my recommendations, we need to look at sociology, anthropology. We need to look at, community side. We need to look at social work. These are the people who are doing some neat, real novel things. We're going to get an example today. And they did not like that. And so that's but they couldn't like not pass me because I was right. And so but I was not a very popular person there, but I was going to be gone in a couple months anyway. Yeah. And actually, Rosalia, you're correct. In the book I had, it only, we're the only ones apparently who can like tacos. I don't know why. I think everyone should have a taco. Okay. So after this talk is over, please, everybody get tacos. That's a very anti-racist action we're all going to unite under tacos. I think that'll save us all is if we unite under tacos. Okay. Because that's one thing we can agree on. Like if I'm arguing with anybody and we're having an argument, I say, hey, man, you want some tacos? And then we're good to go. Okay. Yeah, me and Patrick are about to get in the fight. Hey, you want some tacos, Patrick? Like, yeah, I love tacos. Yeah, we're good to go then. Okay. So yeah, taco. Thank you. Yes, that's if you take one thing from this talk is tacos. Okay. There we go. I'd be very happy with that. So let's start with first contact. This is the one from anthropology. Please, I know you won't, but I still got to put this because I work a lot with like medical students and lawyers. Don't print this out. Okay, just these are kind of, this is a way to think through what's called a mini ethnographic exam. Okay, and then, I have it somewhere, man. I can send it out to you, but I think it was crap. I think it was it's probably the worst professional work. Your dissertation is always your worst research article, by the way. So, but if you really want it, And so the ethnography is, if those of you who are not familiar with it, it's not understanding the culture from like my perspective to you. So like, okay, you're, you know, Native American, you're Cherokee. So I'm going to understand you from my perspective up high. It's like, look, I don't know anything about Cherokee Nation, so I really need to immerse myself in them and really kind of, and I'm never going to really understand it, but it's, if the immersion part of it will at least give me a better comprehension of what I don't know and how to actually have a communication pattern with this person who is of that culture, of that race, of that ethnicity. And by the way, these are, for those of you who do work like with direct families, these are just good questions to ask. So let's take one like diabetes versus something that okay, I'm just going to pause real quick to keep it real moment. Does anyone not know what Mal the Ojo is? Evil eye. Okay. Does anyone not? Okay, Mal, look at this, like does anyone know now with the huevo for the ojo? Does anyone know what I'm talking about? I think Joy and Sandra do. I'm gonna pick on Joy. Joy, do you know what the huevo for the ojo is? Joy.
I just know mal de ojos like a curse, like my grandmother used to.
Okay.
Yeah, a curse on you.
Okay. All right. I want to get I may say your name wrong here, Randy.
Yes, okay.
Randy. What is the huevo for the ojo? Can you explain that to people?
Well, I've learned throughout the years that every culture in the Hispanic community has a different meaning, but at least in my culture, they use the egg to kind of pull out the mal de ojo, or the bad eye. And the way that we interpret it is when someone gets bad eye or mal de ojo is because someone either looked at, normally it's more common in the baby, they looked at the baby in a bad way, or they have a bad energy and they put that energy towards the baby.
You got it. Right, that's it. And Lucia's right. You can't. So when I was younger, I would have bad
How do you pronounce it again? Sorry.
I'll actually put it in the chat box, Tony. It's a mal de ojo. That's the huevo for the, I maybe spelled huevo wrong, for the ojo, the egg for the ojo. And so I would get migraines, really bad migraines. And so the obvious answer, thank you, Lucia, you guys spelled it wrong. The obvious reason for my migraines was I had ojo, I had evil eye. Okay, I was cursed. And so my mom would do sign of the cross, because the evil's here, sign of the cross, and would put the egg on my head, and she would say the Hail Mary, sign of the cross, you know, while she was doing it. And then she would crack the egg in a little glass of water and put that egg the cracked egg under my bed. And however much the egg spidered out in the water is how much evil I had, is how much it's sucked out. I am a PhD. I am a published researcher. I am a scientist. That egg freaking works, dude. I will go to my grave with that. That egg worked, man. Yeah, then Rosalia, she would throw it out like after the night was over. But like, yeah, that egg worked. I don't know if there's some scientific explanation, but let's say that, let's use the Kleinman questions on it, okay? Let's say that, Mr. Gomez, what do you call the problem? Mal de ojo. What do you think caused the problem? I was cursed. Someone gave me evil eye. When do you think it started? Maybe about a week or two ago, okay? What does this sickness do, Mr. Gomez? How does it work? Someone cursed me, and so it's going to make me worse and worse, and I'm going to get just progressively worse. Okay, how bad is it? Is it long or short? Could be long, or I could die pretty quickly. Okay, what kind of treatment do you think you really like? What kind of treatment do you think this will help with? I have to go to a priest and get the evil removed. So what are the chief problems it's caused you? Headaches, and I feel really tired and really fatigued. What do you feel most about the sickness? I'm going to die. The treatment, I haven't been a good Catholic. I haven't gone to church, so I don't know if the Father would accept me. Okay, now let's do diabetes. Mr. Gomez, what do you call the problem? Diabetes. What do you think caused the problem? I don't know. Pancreas, insulin, I have no idea, man. What do you think? Why do you think it started? In my 40s, so, this probably a lot of guys in my family get diabetes around this time. What do you think? So you see the point, right? That it can be used for anything. It doesn't have to be used for by the way, when we rolled this out at University of Oklahoma in family medicine, we had to really train the students a lot on this, because they would see a Z on the last name. Oh, they're Latino. So they would, and actually I had to go because I had a cold, and they saw the Z on the last name, and they go, Mr. Gomez, what do you call this problem? A cold. What do you think caused the problem? I have a cold. I was like, and I just had to go to the residents and said, hey man, I know you're doing the Kleinman questions, but I don't need those right now, dude. I just need the medicine. Can you just please, right? And so, so yeah, so that's why I say please don't do that. Just don't put it, in like a slide. But these are good questions. You don't have to do them in order. Like this is really the whole thing that these questions are designed around is what Dr. Kleinman calls an illness narrative. Like I need to know how your like sickness, illness, dysfunction, like pain, whatever you call it, whatever name you have, ojo, like how does that work from your perspective? Not from my perspective, but from yours. That doesn't mean my perspective is not valuable. You can have both perspectives. That's a big part of this. I just need to know, like, so if I say, hey, try this insulin for a week and see how it works. I'm not saying like, oh, that's stupid, Mr. Gomez. The evil eye doesn't exist. That's just superstition. I don't have to say that. That's counterproductive. I just need, but also if someone tries to understand you, when I work with medical students, especially, I'll say, here's where you're in danger in an interaction with someone who is racially, culturally, ethnically diverse. Here's where you're in danger, and you as a physician are going to think you're doing great. Here it is. Okay, so Olga, you need to take medicine, right, Olga? Yes, sir. Yes, Dr. Gomez. Okay, you know this, right? This is important. You're going to die. You know this, right? Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yeah. See, Amanda, I had to come to Jesus talk with Olga, and Olga's going to be back in your ER in a week. She just needs to get out. You just dominated her. You were like, this was a very coercive interaction, and she's not going to take the insulin. There you go. And so, yeah, the woman who goes in the dark is a great one, Jessica. Also, where if anyone has read The Spirit Catches You and Knocks You Down about the Hmong family in California, they have a Kleinman shout out. And so it's so he's in kind of the popular culture per se. One thing I do want to show is the biological nature of systemic racism. So there's something called John Henryism. One thing we say a lot, and you'll see this in the Dr. Metzger article we'll show in a second, is rest is an act of rebellion. The fable of John Henry, the still driving man, steam power drill, he had to fight it, but he died fighting it, right? He died like proving it. This is actually one of the leading hypotheses for why COVID-19 is so radically super fatal in African-American populations, even when we control access to health and previous illness. Current research is extending this to Latino and to Native American populations right now and showing the same results, okay? We'll talk about allostatic load in a second, but I want to show you a video of what John Henryism is and why this is important. Okay? And that is a very, very concrete physiological biomarker of what systemic racism does in real time. Current research is looking at, again, Latino populations and Native American, and there's a pilot's being planned for, I think, a Chinese American cohort in San Francisco, maybe. But that, that's essentially like the concept of allostatic load comes in. Allostatic load, the short version is the allostatic load is the gear you drive the automobile that is your body. So if you go top gear and you gun it down the highway, like we know Taylor does every time she goes to work, then you're going to run through your car pretty quickly. But if you do some good gear shifts, you'll be fine. One of the original study that Dr. James did was on heart. He called it surface deep resilience. So I do a lot of work in resilience literature for my, when I was in coming out of grad school, and I don't like the resilience literature a lot, in part because some of it's great, but some of it seems very dismissive. Here's my keep it real moment. Like, hey, Michael, man, you made it, man. You came up, man. You got out of poverty. I know you were like juvie, man. You did it. You made it. And I'm like, F you, man. You know how many people like boys I lost, man, and all this stuff that's like all, the baggage I'm still carrying with me, man. Like, that's what I want to say, but I can't say that because I'm a doctor, right? Doctors don't listen to other doctors. And so John Henryism, things like this, validate that and saying, yeah, you did it, man, but John Henry did it too. And we don't want that outcome. And so basically allostatic load, if you are, subject to systemic racism, right? You're African-American, BIPOC, Native American, you're in fifth gear all the time. You never can come down, right? What I was told is, don't be the lazy Mexican, but don't work too hard because it scares them. That's what I was told growing up all the time. It's like, you got to have that nice middle ground. If anyone knows W.B. Du Bois, the concept of double consciousness, like you can't just be one person, you have to be many people. Like the person I'm now is kind of different than when I'm with my friends and I'm with a patient and I had a couple of supervisors coming like, man, you can really navigate like really well. People like, yeah, because I had to learn that growing up, man. I also realized that if I'm 5-0, 1-0, if I can make somebody laugh, they don't punch me in a bar. It's a really useful skill, right? So yeah, play to my strengths. And so, but essentially by the way, this is not just like an African-American, Latino thing. Remember the pandemic? Remember in April, May of 2020, you were working from home and you were never more exhausted in your life, right? That's allostatic load. Because primates are social creatures and they know something is going on in the environment. So you were in 5th or 6th gear for all of 2020, which is why you were so exhausted by June. So I mean, some of us by April or May, right? And so that's why, because it's a biological thing. Epigenetics is another field there. And so like epigenetics was done in not concentration camp survivors, but their grandchildren, showing that the effects that they had in Auschwitz and Dachau follow them in their genetics up until their grandkids. Yeah? And so, I think it's like rest is resistance, rest is rebellion, which actually we planned this before the call. You appreciate this. And so this is Dr. Aisha Metzger. We'll drop her website in a second, aishametzger.com. We do a lot of trauma-focused CBT, and she talks about racial socialization. So what is that? You're socialized in everything. You're socialized in terms of your gender socialization. You're socialized in, like media. You're socialized in education. We get socialized in pretty much everything. So what are your messages about race? And so one thing that Dr. Metzger points out is part of PTSD is avoidance. PTSD is the only diagnosis you got to not want to talk about, right? So if we're not talking about race and racism, isn't that avoidance? Isn't that in a way amplifying or being complicit with your trauma? Again, being heard, being recognized is the opposite of being traumatized. So one thing, those of you, if anyone does clinical work, if you don't, this is still kind of a useful way to think through things. Here's an example of when Dr. Metzger applied racial socialization theories for African-American populations in trauma-focused CBT. This is her table, ready? Thank you, guys, for dropping that in the box. So relaxation. Do you have to work twice as hard, right? Also, do you cope with your spirituality? Is prayer one of your coping methods? Like, I trust myself in Christ our Lord. Then we're going to use that. Yeah, we don't, if that's your coping method, we're going to use that. An example I use is that I got from Dr. Metzger is in African-American culture, not necessarily everybody, but kind of a big picture thing. Does anyone know why spanking and corporal punishment is really common in African-American communities, more so than like if you see like a Caucasian community? Does anyone know why? Not everyone, but like why it tends to be a little bit more predominant?
Because it's been used for generations. Like Native Americans,
I'll say Native Americans it applies to.
My family spanked me, so
yeah,
I think I turned out well.
Yeah, and so yeah, Brenda, it's slavery. In 1950s Alabama, if we're going to be honest, you can't do a timeout. If that kid doesn't shut up, that kid's dead, right? So spanking becomes a way that you save a child's life. That's what it came from. And so if we don't acknowledge that in a trauma model, then we're just not doing good trauma therapy, right? So we got to, see what's the function of this, like where's this stuff coming from? Like one of the things as a person who does CBT, cognitive behavior therapy, I'd change a lot of the language. Like one thing that I changed, instead of we call it cognitive structuring or cognitive processing, I changed it to cognitive comprehension. Like I need to understand how, so mom, you spank your kid and you think, you seem to think that's effective. Tell me, I need to understand that. I don't understand it. Right. By the way, I did get spanked when I was a kid. I just didn't do anything. And so I was a complete jerk to my mom. Like, is there a window open? Like, I'm just such a jerk to my mom. Like, and she's a saint of a woman. And so we want to integrate these concepts of racial socialization in there. Okay? And so a very concrete example, Dr. Metzger calls it the BELIEF acronym. She also uses this, what I call this rain metaphor, which I love. She says, okay, let's say you're in a really leaky building. It is a fact that it's leaking on you and there's a lot of leaks. It is not your responsibility to fix the building, but can we help navigate you so that you're at least relatively dry by the time you walk out of that building, right? So you don't have to fix all the racism in the school district, but like, hey man, how can I help? And she gives BELIEF as an example of when you're talking to a kid, like I'll use a teenage example of how, so First, I need to understand, Lori, exactly what happened from your perspective. Now, don't jump to alternative. Look, well, Shadana, they obviously didn't mean it when they said that to you. I don't know, maybe they did mean it to her. Okay? And then I say, okay, why, Rosalia, do you think this happened? You think this happened? We explicitly ask, do you think it's racism? Do you think something racist is going on here, or bigoted, or prejudice, or gender bias? We just straight ask that question there. If they haven't already brought it up by the E, we'll ask them. And so, because we want to make, because has anyone ever had the experience where like, yeah, that wasn't racist? They were just saying like, and you feel super invalidated. You're like, look, and you're like, okay, I don't know if it was, but like, dude, can you at least consider racism? But they're, it's hard for them to do because it's uncomfortable. And so then let's talk about racial stressors. Like one thing I do a lot is brain science. It's like, you did this not because you're Black, because you have an amygdala. That's why you did this. There's some very, very terrifying research. I think John Hopkins did it, where they examined African-American high schoolers in Baltimore, one of the kind of beating hearts of systemic racism, and compared their fMRIs to PTSD veterans from Iraq, like two-tour combat veterans. Their amygdalas look the same. A two-tour combat veteran from Iraq and Afghanistan and a 17-year-old Black kid in Baltimore. You can see how those are related, right? And why that's important. So now, what's the impact on your life? And then at the very least, you can be empathetic, like, hey man, that sucks. And then we try like, okay, so now let's give a big part of us, especially when we do trauma work with kids who are, diverse kids, like DEI, BIPOC. I want you to have some language around this, man. I want you to be able to at least say what you're feeling like. This is this like, okay, yeah, but how, like, no, what's the internal experience, man? Because a lot of times, like, again, here's another keep it real moment. We get two feelings where I'm from as men, Mexican men, angry or not. And that's it. Those are all your feelings. If you're female, you get a couple more, but that's it. And so a lot of times when I break it down, it's like, hey man, like, just say like, hey man, are you sad, man? Or you feel hurt? And sometimes you kind of catch them, like say Sandra asks, like, like 16-year-old Michael, like, hey Michael, like, you feel like let down? Do you feel disappointed? Like, yeah, Miss Castaneda, yeah, man. Oh, man. And you can kind of start chipping away at that, right? You can go out of order, but please don't jump to action. Like, okay, then after believe, then you got to do an action step. Okay, now what are we going to do? A lot of people want to jump to the action step, and we want you to wait a little while to do that. Like, I want you to cognitively comprehend what's going on before you start jumping to action. So if you take nothing else from our talk today, first, tacos, take that. Second is take that. If all you can do is give an understanding, like, I just want an understanding of what's happening here, then you've done a really effective thing. You've done a very helpful thing for that person. And so here we go. So Dr. Metzger, because she's awesome, talks about like, well, here's what CBT is: thoughts, feelings, behavior. That's also culture too. So she calls this the Black technique. We're gonna breathe. So like, let's say you have a kid coming in fired up. All right, so Michael, let's just breathe. I just want you to breathe for a second. Okay, tell me in your body, again, John Henry is a allostatic load. Where is it at? Okay, now let's communicate. I'm going to ask some questions. What's going through your head? So please also don't don't tell them to do the thing they already tried to do. You try to talk to G, try that. Ms. Cassidy, I tried it. Like, okay, I know you did that. So this way for sake of time, I'm going to skip Dr. Hughes's example, but she has a good example of really kind of diving into this. A resource check. If anyone does therapy, like if you're doing active therapy or clinical work, TFCBT comes out as a very fluid model for dealing with diverse populations. In part because it's been done on every continent on the planet Earth except Antarctica, and in our defense, there are not a lot of children there. The penguins really hated it. Okay. A very kind of practical manual for this is Dr. Jeff Weiner and some of the other people at Boston Children's talk about, especially if you're working with refugee immigrant populations, like people coming directly from other countries, there's an application if you've been here for a while, but I know some people on this call are probably working with those individuals that are there just coming to America relatively recently. And so now, because I did promise you some macro strategy, and I know we're going relatively fast, so thank you all for bearing with me, is I have this thought in this kind of theory that all world-changing events never begin with one person, but the nucleus of world-changing events rarely breaks 20 people. Now, ultimately, it'll break like thousands of people, but let's think of like, let's just take some of our stuff in our, Cuba was 6 guys in a boat. American Revolution was about 24 men and women. October Revolution is about 5 guys, right? That it does amp up these giant world-changing events into many, many people, but really when these really like civil rights movement, the women's suffrage movement, these things that have been literally world-changing, history defining, probably about 24 people max. That's where it really starts, and that's really what keeps it going. So we have more than enough people on this call to change the world. So when people tell me, hey, you need to kind of stay in your lane, Dr. Gomi. I mean, this is like, I know, you want to help people. Like, you just got to kind of, do it one at a time. And I'm like, nah, I think I'm going to pass that one, man. Now, like, you aim for the moon and you miss it. You're at least among the stars, right? So yeah. So I'd rather fail at something I believe in than, fail at something I don't, right? You can fail at stuff you suck at, by the way. And so if all you're like, you know what, I'm just really interested in kind of the stuff like that Kleinman stuff, the John Henryism stuff, just this stuff, anti-racism, this face-to-face, then that's fine. You can kind of like chill out for the next couple of minutes of the talk. But I think a lot of you are on this call and on the Zoom because you at some level, you kind of want to change the world, or at least change your world, right? Your community, your people. And I'm going to explicitly encourage you to do that. I'm going to explicitly encourage you to do something insane. Like, yeah, you can do it. Why not? Like 6 guys in Cuba changed the world, right? Yeah, there you go. And so that's what happened, right? So as some kind of examples of macro strategies, National Child Traumatic Stress Network, I'm a member of it. Our motto is still shamelessly, share relentlessly. We have a lot of resources, especially more current ones about anti-racism, culture and trauma, and a big focus on racial injustice, historical trauma. One of the things that I'm just going to throw my own state under the bus, Texas, when the incarceration of children in the Texas border happened, NCTSN released our shortest statement I've ever seen in the 15 years I've been a part of it. Here's what it was. The incarceration of Mexican children at the border is child abuse. All right, we're done. We're good. We can call it a day. And so, and yes, Michael, you can put these in the chat for sure. And that was it, because it is. And that's why I'm proud to be part of this organization. I do a lot of work also in secondary trauma. And apparently they asked me to be on a think tank, which I had no business being in that think tank. It was kind of like, here's what it was like. There's Tony Stark, Hulk, Thor, Hawkeye. Like, I got a bow and arrow, like I'm an Avenger, right? Like, sure you are, buddy, sure you are. And so, yeah, but I said a comment that got some interesting, not bad feedback, but it was surprising to me because it just seems like a very obvious statement. And then what I said was, if you're not addressing systemic racism and injustice, you're not doing secondary trauma work. You're not doing trauma work either. That was it. And that's just like a very obvious statement to me. And people blew up. They're like, man, you're right. And I was like, no one's ever said that. Like, I'm not an original thinker. And so essentially, yeah, that's what, if you're not doing, I don't think you're doing good ADHD work. You're not doing good ECI work. You're not doing good, high school work. You're not doing good college education work. It's just like, this is just such a part of I'm just going to speak for our country. This is such a part of our experience in this country. It's kind of a physician who doesn't talk about blood. Like, you don't talk about blood all the time, but like, it's probably going to come up if you're a doctor, man. It's just a really kind of bizarre thing that people think we can silo this. So apparently that got a lot of traction, but also was very much supported by the national network. And so it's a really good all the resources are also in Spanish. They're back translated. There's also, you can get them in like Farsi, French. You contact Duke or UCLA, the 2 flagship sites, and say, hey, I saw this cool resource, but it's not in French. Great. Or it's not in Arabic. And they can usually help you out, by the way. So if you have more specific population. Now, this one is from my alma mater, University of Kansas. It's the Community Toolbox. And so I will kind of take you through, here's what it looks like. Okay, this is why I love it. Tools to change the world. The one you just saw go off screen, working to address systemic racism. Visit the new Justice Toolkit. I totally didn't plan that, by the way. It's just like organic, it's meant to be. So you want to register voters. Here's how I do it. I want to do right leadership. How do I actually write a letter to an elected official, right? How to organize a boycott, because we are subversive, and that's why I like my people. Rock, Chalk, Jayhawk, KU, right? Initiating legal action. Like, this is part of what we believe community psychology should be, is advocating for the disenfranchised. You know, I've had talks with some professors about this, and they kind of disagree with that philosophy. They're like, no, it's like, all right, dude, you get to be social justice Batman and you are complaining. Like, you're in a position of privilege and you can help people, and you're like, this is a bad idea for you. This is weird to me. And so I'll put this, you can access the entire the community toolbox. It's not just specifically about this. You can get many other resources, like I want to know how to set a public agenda. I want to know how to train volunteers. I want to know how to do effective leadership. It's completely free. This is a free resource that the community psychology department at University of Kansas has and will have forever. If you want the pretty like PDF, like laminated version, there's a charge for it, but you know, that's pretty much, I think that's fair. And so that's and I don't know if anyone actually, I forgot to ask, if anyone has used the community toolbox. But thank you, Kat, for putting that in, because again, I'm biased because I did my training in Kansas, but I think it's a very good resource, and I love that it is free. And so now, I also like to talk about things that are not from the U.S. because we tend to get very U.S. centric in this conversation. And so, has anyone read this book, Pedagogy of the Oppressed, Paulo Freire? All right, well, Patrick, okay, a lot of people have. So, short version is, I ran into this book when I was doing my dissertation, and it's essentially, again, I'm butchering Paulo Freire, he's brilliant, but education usually is very oppressive, and it doesn't have to be, it can be free, and oppressive is a dominant paradigm. It's also faster. Hey, Amanda, I'm the doctor, and I'm gonna tell you what you need to learn, Amanda, so you're gonna do it, okay? Dang, man, who are you? But the freeing one, the liberating one, takes more time, and it really implies all our teachers and all our learners, which is why I'm encouraging your chat box, I'm encouraging your comments, because you have knowledge I don't. We can all teach someone something, and we can all learn something from someone. That's a much more open way of correcting. But Freire also adds in, its action is a key. It's very anti-tokenism, it's very anti-racism. He was talking about these kind of concepts before, you know, the anti-racism wasn't even a term, not using the language though, but talking about these action steps we got to take. So anyone who I meet in the field of education, whether you're I'm doing K through 12, or I'm doing like college, I'll say, hey, you may want to, if you're really interested in this and you want to look at these things, I would really like you to kind of, look at Freire stuff. Oh my gosh, you guys went to such a great school. It's like, you got Kidney to speak? Oh my gosh, okay, you're going to have to say that later. I want to give you a couple minutes to talk about that, because that's legit. Now, has anyone heard of Ignacio Martin-Baba? Okay. He does what's called liberation psychology, which has its roots in a 16th century monk, and so Gustavo Gutierrez, and he's my personal hero as a psychologist, because he is the only psychologist to die in the line of duty. He was doing field research in Central America, and the government did not like what he had, and he got killed because of that. I think it's in El Salvador. And so, but he has this big idea of like, you're driven by the problem, not the discipline. Okay, if your problem is child abuse, like I want to tackle the problem of child abuse, I will take any discipline. If you're a social worker, if you're a nurse, if you're a teacher, if you're a child welfare worker, if you're a psychologist, I don't care what your discipline is, this is my problem. I'm going to be militant and focused on the problem of child abuse, and I just won't relent. And anybody who has any way to fix that problem or address it, you're in. And he did see psychology as social justice. It's not just staying in your office. He saw this guy was completely formative in my career, because when everybody was telling me just stay in your office, he was saying, no, psychology and mental health, this is a social justice activity. By being a doctor, by being a psychologist, you are engaging in a social justice activity, whether you know it or not. And that's a University of Oklahoma, one of my training sites. That's where I went to. State of Michigan that I work with now also is unified in like the social justice aspect. of it. And so those are just some examples of where current initiatives I have, but it's like, no, we're going to be at the Capitol lobbying for our foster kids. Yeah, we're going to be at the Capitol talking about we need prevention for our early childhood. Like for these moms who just got Oklahoma has the highest female incarceration rate in the US. These moms need help. They don't need to be put back in prison. And guess what ethnicity those moms are, right? So yeah. Now, second to last thing, not everything that is faced can be changed, but nothing can be changed until it is faced. See, I'm obviously a very big Baldwin fan. And so I will leave a little bit of time for questions. I'm glad I got there. I will also leave you with your superhero name, okay? So I am Ultra Magician. I think Rosalia, who are you? Rosalia has a grant. She is Sultry Magician. Emily, you are Big Griffin. That's a great one. Okay, Joseph, who are you? Joseph, oh my God, I think Joseph wins. Undead Serpent. I'm sorry, Joseph might take the title for the day. I'm sorry to call it so early, but okay, Undead Puma, Jessica might get you beat, Joseph. Sorry, Undead Puma might be great. And Shiny Comet is very respectable, Colleen. And then, so, but, so thank y'all so much. And I'll leave a little bit of time for questions if you want to, or just any kind of comments you have. You don't necessarily have to have a question, just anything that kind of stood out from the talk, or, hey, I have this comment. Also, Shandana will talk about Ibram Kendi speaking to her, and like, just, so she's going to do the next talk, me and her are going to co-pilot. Okay? That sounds amazing to me. But any questions, comments, or just thoughts or reflections from tonight? Because I really do appreciate your time.
Is there any more literature or something I can read on the honoring the treaties? I went to the website, whoever put it on the chat, and kind of just didn't really have like self-explanatory so I can navigate through. Like
I actually can do you one better, Tony. If you send me an email, I can connect you to the person who runs it, and then they can answer.
I got you.
Yeah. So yeah, feel free to do that. So
put it in the chat.
Yeah. Oh no, just feel free to check in with me directly. I don't know if my slide I'll put the slide back up real quick. My email. Okay. Let me see.
Oh, gotcha. Okay.
Yeah. Let's see. All right. And so Dream Seeker. Okay. Oh, thank you, Guadalupe. How can we transfer these changes in our everyday work indirectly with families? So making sure I'm creating resources that are anti-racist. That's a great question. The short answer to that question, Guadalupe, is I am a big fan of go ahead and try, give it your shot for. I think it's also really good practice if you haven't done a lot of this, hey, let me take a shot at doing some of the resources. And then a big thing we did this a lot in Oklahoma. We do it a lot in National Network. We have lived experience that is represented in every level of what we do. So if we have a school in trauma group, we have doctors there, we have teachers. We also have people who, hey man, I was in alternative ed when I was a kid, and I'm a former foster kid. And we have a parent hey, I have 2 kids who have really bad trauma, and I need to tell you from the parent perspective. So essentially incorporating the voice of lived experience, and so making it more collaborative. And also I tend to highly recommend any resource you create, review that resource. I'd say every 3 months is my recommendation. If you don't use it a lot, maybe every 6, but because you can see how they can get dated real quick. And so even something that doesn't seem like it might be dated. So like an example, we had an attendance policy that we had never reviewed at our center. And then I reviewed it, and I was like, this is going to kind of F up our BIPOC families. They're not going to be able to get in because we have this cancellation, they work a lot more, they don't have evening time. So we really need to review this entire attendance policy and really kind of find a way to make it more equitable, because it's really skewing to families that can get off at 5 essentially. And my mom couldn't. And most of the families that need this won't be able to. And as simple as that sounds, it ended up being very impactful, because then we saw a noticeable shift in how many more African American, Latino, and we had some Native American population in there. How many people of color that we got into our center that really needed the help when we started really kind of looking at that attendance policy. So, so I don't know if that was helpful, Guadalupe, and if it wasn't, you can just okay, thanks. Other questions or thoughts or comments? All right. Hey, is everybody going to get tacos? Shanana, you're going to get tacos?
I think I'm gonna make some tacos. It's really cool to see you again. I took a training and you led that training, I believe it was last year through Caltrans. So what a beautiful thing to see that you're still continuing doing this work and showing up as yourself. We need more people like you in the field.
They don't know what to do with one of me. Okay, so yeah, they need more of me. Okay, but I appreciate you saying that. So thank you. And so, yeah, they think Kat's going to get tacos, so is Lindsay. Again, that's the thing I really need you to take away. Dana will be very upset about that, but tacos.
I am actually very upset about that because I'm currently in Cedar Rapids, Iowa, and no offense to Cedar Rapids, but not tacos mostly.
Yeah, yeah.
Some tacos, but not like home. Michael, I know you're probably watching the chat and seeing the thanks and the comments coming in, and we would really like to thank you for joining us again this evening. I think you've heard that Michael is in Rhode Island, so he is joining us for his evening. So this was just really great of you to be able to do this tonight.
No problem.
And as we've experienced with our other trainings with you, it's a breadth and depth of knowledge that is always surprising. The conversation goes a lot of places, and you do bring that lived experience piece that just makes it really authentic and engages all of us, I think, in a way that makes us think well after the training is over. I know that I jotted down a bunch of notes and things that I want to read and catch up on. So we thank all of you for joining us. It is a complex conversation, and I love that we had the opportunity to look at both the micro and the macro, especially as we're starting this new year, to think about how we ourselves are framing these conversations, but how our organizations are working as well. So logistically, there is a survey in the chat. We do read everything you send us and try to build training based on that. So take a couple of minutes. And as you've seen, Dr. Gomez has joined us a couple of times, and hopefully he will join us again. So that feedback is valuable for us as we work with him as well. So again, we really thank you for having us. And we look forward to seeing you at another training.